Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of Digital Fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn. AetherDrift spoiler season is in full swing, but they've sort of paused their output of cards for Standard over the weekend, which will resume in full force on Monday. I wanted to use that as an opportunity to cover all of the crazy new Commander cards that we haven't gotten around to talking about yet. I'm not going to cover any of the reprints or the full deck lists for the Commander decks, but I am going to detail every single brand new card that's being printed for these Commander decks in the Commander AetherDrift set. And we're going to start with the actual commanders themselves. So let's dive right in. Before I do, please like the video. It helps me get it out to so many more people. Subscribe if you're new because I have a ton of content on the way. And catch me live Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/quarantinecapricorn. Because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. Now let's do this. We're going to start with Eternal Might, which is the Esper commander deck. Blue, black, and white. And the commander for this deck is Temmet Naktamun's Will, a 4/4 legendary zombie wizard for 5 mana in the colors of Esper. He has Vigilance, he has Menace. Whenever you attack, you draw a card and then discard a card. And whenever you draw a card, zombies you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So basically, this entire commander deck is going to be based around zombie tribal, being able to buff up all of your zombies, but also with a sub-theme of drawing cards. The more cards you can draw, the more buffs you can hand out to your zombies, which is pretty interesting. And then we have the backup commander here for this deck, which is Hashaton Scarab's Fist, a 1/3 legendary zombie wizard for 2 mana in the colors of Orzhov. And whenever you discard a creature card, you can pay 1 blue and 2, and if you do, you create a tapped token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. So with this guy, you're definitely going to want to value ways to discard things as much as possible, which works pretty decently well in conjunction with the first commander that we saw. But anything that lets you discard cards from your hand to get any kind of value, you can get even more value off of Hashaton. And then the other commander deck is Living Energy. This is Temur, so red, blue, and green. Had a bit of a brain fart there. And the commander for this deck is Saheeli Radiant Creator, a 4/4 legendary human artificer for 4 mana in the colors of Temur. Whenever you cast an artificer or artifact spell, you get 1 energy counter. Pretty cool that it works when you cast artificers as well, so some of your creatures will be able to trigger this. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you can pay 3 energy. When you do, create a token that's a copy of target permanent you control, except it's a 5/5 artifact creature in addition to its other types, and has haste. Pretty gnarly. You sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step though, so obviously this deck's going to center around getting as much energy as possible, having different payoffs for that energy. This actually being able to do both, supply you energy and have a payoff for that energy. Just, you know, make a bunch of 5/5s with haste. Seems pretty cool. You get the value for the copy coming into play and triggering things, and if it has death triggers, maybe you can get the value off of that as well. So there's a lot of nuance you can find with an ability like that. And the backup commander is Pia-Nalaar, Chief Mechanic. She's a 2/4 legendary human artificer for 3 mana in the colors of Temur. And whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get 2 energy counters. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1 or more energy, and if you do, create an XX colorless vehicle artifact token named Nalaar Aetherjet with flying and crew 2, where X is the amount of energy spent this way. Pretty interesting card. Gives you another way to generate energy by being super aggressive, and another payoff for that energy at once a turn, being able to make, you know, a big flying vehicle depending on how much energy you actually choose to pay. Pretty cool. Now let's dig into the actual cards in these decks. First up, we have Accursed Dunyard. This is a land that taps for just 1 colorless mana, but it also has the ability to pay 2, tap it, regenerate target Shade, Skeleton, Spectre, Spirit, Vampire, Wraith, or Zombie. Now obviously this is meant to be used on zombies, but I think it's pretty cool that it's so versatile and it can hit so many different creature types. You could run a bunch of different possible tribal decks and make this work in it, or run a deck that just happens to have a bunch of creatures that are each of these creature types, so you can get a lot of value off of a card like this. So it's pretty cool. Next up, we've got Wizened Mentor, a 2/2 zombie cleric for 1 white and 1. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a permanent that isn't a mana ability, you create a 1/1 white zombie creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now, most decks these days are chock full of activated abilities. As power creep sets in, there's just such a higher density of activated abilities in any deck regardless of whatever you're running. So that makes this way better than it probably would have been maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Basically just giving you a free 1/1 zombie every turn. Once a turn. Once on your turn, once on their turn, which is relevant. You know, if they use an ability on your turn and their turn, you'll get 2 1/1 zombies every turn cycle, which is actually pretty gnarly. But next up, we've got Renewed Solidarity, an enchantment for 1 white and 2. As it enters, you choose a creature type, and creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+0. At the beginning of your end step, for each token you control of the chosen type that entered this turn, you create a token that's a copy of it. Pretty interesting. It buffs up your whole team and makes tokens for 3 mana. In that way, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Wedding Announcement. The downside being that it's not generating tokens by itself. It needs to trigger off of, you know, other things. But you make a copy of every single token that entered, so you're not limited to just getting 1 token every turn, which I think makes this have a much higher ceiling than Wedding Announcement. And also you get the buff right away. Even though it's not a straight +1/+1, it's a +1/+0. You get it right out of the gate. You don't have to wait until you get 3 activations out of it like Wedding Announcement. So I don't even know if we really should be comparing this card to Wedding Announcement. It's probably going to be used in very different ways in very different decks. Because with Wedding Announcement, it's kind of that automatic value that makes it so good. But still a really cool card. Making copies of all your tokens seems pretty insane, honestly. But next up, we've got Priest of the Crossing. This is 1 white and 3 for a 3/3 zombie bird cleric with flying. At the beginning of each end step, you put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of creatures that died under your control this turn. So the more things that die, the more counters you give out, and all of those counters go on every creature. So it's kind of interesting. The more creatures that die, the more counters you get, but the more creatures that are left still alive means you have more creatures to put those counters on. So I feel like there is kind of a delicate balance in how you use this. Obviously, if you have ways to sacrifice your creatures and choose exactly what creatures and how many you want to lose during each of your turns, you can make this card way more valuable. But also getting a 3/3 flyer on top of that is not nothing either. And since it's a zombie and a bird and a cleric, it's got 3 different relevant creature types that could matter in certain circumstances. So pretty cool card. Next up, we've got On Wings of Gold, another enchantment for 1 white and 3. Creatures you control that are zombies and or tokens get +1/+1 and flying, and whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you create a 1/1 white zombie creature token. So this is like a mono white Insidious Roots, except it costs a lot more, and you can't tap the tokens for mana. But getting a white zombie every single time a card leaves your graveyard, and it doesn't have to be a creature card, like with Insidious Roots, is actually kind of nuts. Granted, 4 mana is a lot, so by the time you get this out, it might not be that nuts. But still, pretty crazy. And then just, you know, buffing everything up and giving it flying, not only to your zombies, but also to your tokens. So you can play this in like a commander deck that uses just straight up tokens and doesn't care about zombies, and it could still be really good. Or you could just use it in a zombie tribal deck, and it could be good in that too. So pretty interesting card, a lot of different ways you can use it. Next up, we've got Lost Monarch of Ifnir, a 4/4 zombie noble with Afflict 3 for 1 black and 3. So Afflict 3 means whenever this creature becomes blocked, defending player just loses 3 life, just straight up. This could be pretty cool for triggering things like start your engines to get your speed up to max speed and stuff like that, which is pretty interesting. Other zombies you control have Afflict 3. That makes it even better. And then at the beginning of your second main phase, if a player was dealt combat damage by a zombie this turn, you mill 3 cards and return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So if they block it, they lose 3 life anyway. And if they don't block it, not only does it get through for damage, but you get to mill and get a creature back into your hand, get free value, which seems kind of nuts. Granted, it's only going to trigger once, not once for each creature, whereas with the Afflict, it'll trigger once for each creature. So it's almost like if you're gonna let anything through at all, you might as well let everything through. Otherwise, like, you're losing 3 life to the Afflict kind of for nothing if you even let just one creature through, because they're still gonna get the trigger, and they're not gonna get extra triggers for extra creatures getting through anyway. So really interesting card to try and play around, especially for multiplayer, like a format like Commander, which this is meant for. So yeah, I really like this card. I wish something like this was standard legal, because it just seems super fun to build around, but it'll be super fun in Commander. Next up, we've got Territorial AetherKite, a 6/5 cat dragon with flying and haste for 2 red and 4. That's already pretty gnarly. When this creature enters, you get 2 energy counters, and then you may pay 1 or more energy counters, and when you do, this creature deals that much damage to each other creature. Kind of insane. If you have enough energy, enough ways to generate energy, this can just like be kind of a one-sided board wipe, especially because you get to choose how much energy you pay. I guess you can only choose 1 or 2, right? So it's not going to completely board wipe. It's only really going to board wipe against like aggro and stuff like that. You could do 1 to everything or 2 to everything. You can't do more than that, but it also gives you 2 energy. So I think the versatility of just getting the energy and being able to save it for another payoff, or having it come in and be able to use energy that you already have to kind of pyroclasm seems kind of interesting. It is worth noting this will also hit your own creatures, so you want to be careful and play creatures that are big enough to avoid this. But still, pretty cool payoff for energy. Next up, we've got Stridehanger Automaton, a 1/4 artifact creature construct for 3 mana. Thopters you control get +1/+1. It is a Thopter Lord. I've wanted a card like this for so long, and every time I see a really cool Commander card like this, I get really upset that it's not standard legal. That's like the biggest thing I have against the Commander sets, to be honest, is like I get so excited about brewing for standard, and then if I do see a card I really like that's in the Commander set, it dawns on me I can't use it in standard, and it's such a bummer. But it also has another ability. If 1 or more artifact tokens will be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying are created instead. So every token is going to create another 1/1 flying token, which is crazy. Well, every artifact token, right? Not necessarily every token, but blood tokens, map tokens, clue tokens, treasure tokens, all of it, which is crazy. The main thing to keep in mind is that it's 1 or more, so you want to make sure you're creating your artifact tokens 1 at a time and not necessarily using spells or abilities that make a whole bunch at once, because you're only going to get that 1 Thopter otherwise. But still, a Lord that spits out Thopters every single time you make an incidental artifact token actually seems kind of wild, so that should be super fun in multiplayer. But next up, we've got Rettomb Mystic, a 2/1 zombie bird wizard with flying for 1 blue and 1, and each creature card in your hand has cycling for 1 blue and 1. Honestly, being able to give literally every creature in your deck cycling for 2 mana is kind of nuts in the right deck. There's so many different ways you can brew around this, with all of the different discard payoffs you can get, or maybe madness creatures, right? Discard madness creatures to their cycling to draw a card, and then just pay the madness cost. There's a million ways you could use this. You could even just use this to cycle away creatures that you want in your graveyard for reanimation purposes and stuff like that, or to build up your graveyard for Threshold or Delirium, or honestly, there's so many different ways this can be crazy. So this card seems nuts to me, and I kind of love it. And I also love the fact that it has 3 relevant creature types: zombie, bird, and wizard. Just an awesome card all around if you can build around it properly. But next up, we've got Rampaging Aetherhood. This is a 4/4 Snake Hydra for 1 green and 4. It has Trample, Ward 2, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you get an amount of energy equal to this creature's power. Then you may pay 1 or more energy. If you do, you put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. So you get energy equal to its power, and you could use all of that energy to basically double its power and toughness, which is just crazy. So if you do nothing else, if you make no other energy or don't use your energy for any other payoff, this just doubles its power and its toughness every single turn, which gets really out of hand really fast. But even more so than that, you can generate energy, an insane amount of energy, once this gets a little bit bigger, and then use that crazy amount of energy for other payoffs, which is bananas. You can also just pop this down on a board where you already have a ton of energy and just make it absolutely huge, like the very first turn that you untap with it, and generate an insane amount of energy the turn after that. So really cool ways to use it. To use this card. Yeah, I don't know. This just seems like it's begging to be broken in some sort of a combo. Yeah, there has to be some crazy combos you could use with this to just like all of a sudden generate ridiculous energy and just completely pop off. If you have ideas, definitely let me know in the comments. But next up, we've got Prophet of the Scarab, a 3/4 zombie wizard with vigilance for 1 blue and 4. When this creature enters, you draw cards equal to the number of zombies you control or the number of zombie cards in your graveyard, whichever is greater. It's kind of interesting that it doesn't just give you cards for both. You have to pick and choose, which means if your opponent's smart, they're going to keep, you know, the amount of zombies you have in play and the amount of zombies you have in your graveyard somewhat even. Although they're probably busy being worried about other stuff they have to play around to really bother worrying about that. And this just will come down and draw you a bunch of cards out of nowhere. It's cool that if your board's insane, it'll just draw you a bunch of cards while you have a crazy board. And if your board is wiped, if they play like a Wrath of God or something and everything goes to the graveyard, then you can get almost kind of more value off of this if you're playing against sweepers and control decks. Because if they're just killing everything, now you don't have to worry about any of your zombies being in play to take away from some of your card draw potential. So it is kind of a nice, I wouldn't say an answer to board wipes or control decks that are using a lot of board wipes, but it's a nice response, I guess, to that kind of play style, and could draw you an absolutely insane amount of cards, especially if you like flicker this guy, because it doesn't say you have to play it from your hand to trigger that. It's just whenever it enters, you can get repeated value. I don't know. This just seems kind of nuts, but we're going to move on. Next up, we've got Pima Trailblazer, a 3/3 elephant warrior with trample for 1 green and 2. When this creature deals combat damage to a player, you get that many energy counters, and it has an exhaust ability where you can pay 6 energy counters only once in the entire game. Every exhaust ability, as situationally, can only be used 1 time in the entire game, unless the game loses sight of that object and treats it as a new object. Like if you flicker the Trailblazer, or you know, it dies and you bring it back from the graveyard, or you return it to your hand and replay it, or anything like that, you'll be able to reset those exhaust abilities, which is pretty cool. But pay 6 energy once per game, put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature, and then draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So really cool built-in way of generating energy while also having a kind of a card draw outlet, and just being on the back of a decent, reasonable, threatening body for 3 seems good. I like it. But next up, we've got a Theic Amplifier, an artifact for 3 mana that taps for a mana of any color. So it's kind of your standard mana rock, but there's more. You can pay 4, tap it, choose 1, activate only as a sorcery. Either double the number of each kind of counter on target permanent, or double the number of each kind of counter that you have yourself. Now, what's interesting about that is if you're playing against a poison deck and you're using an energy deck and you want to target yourself to double the number of energy counters you have, you also have to double the number of poison counters and maybe kill yourself or close to it. So that's an interesting little wrinkle to this card that I think is kind of rad. But even if you're just using it to double the number and kind of counter on of each kind of counter on target permanent, it can still be pretty crazy. I like that these abilities just kind of come on the back of just a normal mana rock, so in a way, it's gravy. Like, you're going to probably play mana rocks anyway. It can tap for a mana of any color, not a specific color, which gives it a little bit of a leg up on some of the mana rocks. But yeah, having this ability built in pseudo for free, just really interesting. But next up, we've got Aether Flux Conduit, an artifact for 6 whopping mana. Whenever you cast a spell, you get an amount of energy counters equal to the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. So this thing just loads you up with a metric ton of energy, but you can also tap it and pay 50 energy to draw 7 cards. You may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana costs. Wow. So it's like a one-shot omniscience, kind of, while also drawing seven cards. But what's cool about that too is it's not an exhaust ability. I kind of expected this to be an exhaust ability and only usable once, but every time you get to 50 or more energy, you can just do this again. Not that you'll have to do it again, because you'll probably just win. But the other part that's easy to overlook is, even if you're not using that ability, this is just generating a ton of energy for other stuff in your deck that uses energy. So whichever way you slice it, I think this card is kind of bananas. Next up, we've got Adaptive Omni Tool. This is a 2-mana artifact equipment. It equips for 3. An equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So that could be pretty crazy in the right deck. But whenever equipped creature attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So you get to grab the best artifact from the top 6 cards every single time the equipped creature attacks. What's great about that is you don't have to deal combat damage to the opponent. You don't have to get through with the attack or anything. It's just, if the thing attacks, you get to dig 6 for your best artifact every single time. You could just equip this to a token, and it doesn't even matter if they chump block it or whatever. Like, you're still digging, you're still finding your value, and that seems kind of wild. And then just, you know, turning whatever you equip this into a massive threat because of, I'm assuming, how wide you'll go with artifacts, or else you wouldn't be running this damn thing. Yeah, this is crazy to turn pretty much anything into a lethal threat over and over and over again, while also giving you just sheer value on top. Kind of bananas in any commander deck that's really heavy on artifacts. But that brings us to our last card of the day, Nissa World Soul Speaker, a 3/3 legendary elf druid for 1 green and 3, has a landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, you get 2 energy, which just seems like it's begging to be broken. And then you may pay 8 energy rather than pay the mana cost for permanent spells you cast. So let me get this straight. Every 4th land you play, you get a free permanent from your hand. Yeah, with things like search lands, fetch lands, you know, Fabled Passage, all that kind of stuff, it is so easy to just buff up your energy counters incidentally without even spending mana. But add to that the fact that you're generating energy in whatever deck this is in by other means. You probably just play Nissa and immediately just toss 8 energy out and play your best permanent from your hand. And that seems kind of nuts, especially if you use this to play a free permanent that generates you way more energy than you should be making turn 3 or 4 in the game when you drop this, so that you can just keep doing it. I feel like this could just snowball, get out of control, and be absolutely bananas in the right deck. There's got to be like some crazy ways to use this. So if you have ideas about energy enablers, energy payoffs that would pair super well with this and just go completely ham, let me know in the comments for sure. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you guys for sticking with me. Please like the video so that it gets out to more people. It helps the analytics, and that helps the channel grow. So if you find any value in any of the content that I put out, the best way you can thank me is just by clicking that like button. I appreciate it so much. Also, subscribe if you're new so you never miss an upload. Tons of crazy spoiler content on the way, and a couple ridiculous deck tech ideas for Standard in mind, so look forward to that, and catch me live Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn, because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming, and I'll see you there. AetherDrift is looking crazy. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there, and if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.